During the early modern period of European history, states began to form across the subcontinent. This was characterized by the centralization of power, with the head of state at the expense of the nobility and other centers of power. The formation of Spain began with the marriage of Isabella and Ferdinand in 1469. At this time, early modern Spain was split between three kingdoms: Castile, Aragon, and Granada. After the marriage, the couple ruled together, but Castile and Aragon remained separate kingdoms. This gradually changed, with the two territories becoming more intertwined under their heirs. A key characteristic of their reign was their intention of creating a holy Christian state. This is detailed pretty plainly in several primary sources. Today I'm going to discuss two. The first is the Expulsion of Jews from Spain, written in Hebrew by an Italian Jew 3 years after the expulsion occurred. The second source is the Treaty of Granada, signed in 1491 between the leaders of Granada and the victorious Isabella and Ferdinand after a long war between their kingdoms. So, the intention of creating a purely Christian state brought the monarchs to war with the Muslim kingdom of Granada. Where once Muslim rule had stretched across the peninsula, by the time of Isabella and Ferdinand, it had been confined to the small southern coastal kingdom of Granada. The Reconquista of Spain had long compelled Christians in the lands to wage war against Muslim rule and to establish Christian dominance, and the Catholic kings were no different. After a long conflict, the monarchs were victorious, and the surrender treaty of the Kingdom of Granada was signed. The treaty included assurances of good treatment towards the Muslim inhabitants and greater religious tolerance than the Jewish inhabitants of Spain held. For example, the treaty assured Muslims would never have to wear signs on their clothing, as the Jews were forced to wear to indicate their religion. The assurances given of religious freedom was short-lived, however, with forced conversions being quickly introduced. In 1499, Muslims in Granada rebelled, but were put down quickly by Spanish authorities. Thus began a harsh crackdown on Muslims living in Spain, with all Muslims in Castile being forced to leave or convert, and all writings in Arabic being burnt. By 1501, the Muslim population of the city of Granada, estimated at 50,000 in 1492, had all either fled or converted to Christianity. The treaty does, to a degree, foreshadow the future intentions of the monarchs to Christianize Granada. It does this by encouraging the emigration of Muslims from the new conquered lands. The Christian conquerors promised free and safe passage to any Muslim who wanted to leave for North Africa or other territories. These Muslims were free to leave with their families and wealth, with the only stipulation being that they must leave within 3 years of the signing of the treaty. If they left after that time given, they had to pay for their own passage. This was a clear attempt to incentivize Muslims to leave, as their presence, while more welcome than Jews, were not wanted in a Christian state. In hindsight, the religious tolerance assured in the treaty was likely always meant to be short-lived. The inevitable rebellion of the Muslims offered a pretext to persecute and convert the Muslim population to Christianity. Legal tolerance of non-Christians was inevitably going to end in an era where the nation was strongly identified with Christianity. While conflict would re-erupt over the decades and centuries following the signing of the treaty between Muslim inhabitants and Christian rulers, it marks the end of 7 centuries of Muslim rule and the development of the Christian state, which was the goal of the Catholic kings. Christian hostility to the Jews had existed throughout Europe long before their expulsion from Spain in 1492. In 1391, forced conversions to Christianity took place across the Kingdom of Castile, with the hope that after a few generations their Jewish population would assimilate into Christian society. It was not until the 1450s, however, that the idea of forcefully expelling all Jews from the territory was publicly discussed, following the example of England and France, who had banned Jews from living in their kingdoms. In 1492, the monarchs proclaimed the Edict of Expulsion, forcing the entire Jewish population who had not converted to Christianity out of Spain. An attempt was made by the Jews of Spain to persuade the monarchs to permit Jews to remain in exchange for a large amount of money. This was ultimately rejected, and the Queen then expressed to the Jews that it was God's will that they be expelled. While the primary source likely has a bias against the King and Queen, considering the author was a contemporary European Jew, it once again supports the narrative that the eradication of religious minorities in Spain was religiously motivated. It clearly demonstrates that the expulsion of Jews was a policy choice made by the monarchs, and not just a result of the pervasive anti-Semitism in Spanish society. Jews in Spain were considered by Christians to be even worse than their Muslim inhabitants. This is due to Jews being blamed for many things, including the death of Christ, with their teachings being viewed as even more foreign to Christianity than Islam's. This is made clear when viewing the monarch's different treatment to the Muslims and Jewish populations of Granada. After conquering the kingdom, the Jewish population were given 3 months to leave, along with those in Castile and Aragon. They were not permitted to bring their wealth with them, being forced to sell their estates and exchange their silver and gold for merchandise such as cloths and skins. The Muslims were given much lighter treatment, although this of course was short-lived. They were merely incentivized to go with many, leaving for Muslim kingdoms in North Africa. These same kingdoms refused to let Jews fleeing Spain to enter due to their large numbers, resulting in many of them dying from hunger, thirst, and lack of everything. The Spanish state, then, was, to put simply, inherently a Christian one, and any non-Christians either ruling land or simply practicing their religion within Spain was intolerable to Isabel and Ferdinand. The strategies they employed for producing the Christian state they wanted was straightforward and brutal. It was achieved through warfare, persecution, forced conversions, and expulsion. Both sources reflected this. Granada was conquered and Muslims incentivized to leave in the surrender treaty and afterwards had their assurances of fair treatment revoked. The Jews were forcefully expelled, causing one of the largest Jewish communities in Europe to be shattered beyond repair. The formation of the Spanish state, like many others, is one soaked in persecution and violence. On a more positive note, in modern times, Spain has attempted to correct what is now viewed as a grave and cruel mistake, the Expulsion Edict, by granting citizens to the descendants of Jews that were expelled. That's all for today, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.